Welcome back to Internet 2.0 conference powered by Flow Patterns and Crypto Clue. Now, if you remember, the last time we were here, we understood a transformed world with the Internet of Things and the Internet of Behaviors. It's time that we shift our focus to NFTs, transforming the digital landscape beyond art. Firstly, let's give a big round of applause to this session's moderator, Alejandro Laplana, the CEO of Shokworks Inc., who will guide us and the panelists through this next session. Welcome, Alejandro. He will be joined by Stephen Oliver, the owner of Stephen Oliver Studio, and Dan Bune, the co-founder of Cadeus Solutions. Welcome them to the stage.
Welcome, guys. I'm Alejandro Laplana, founder and CEO of Shokworks, venture capital fund and technology development firm. We're going to talk about. Can you hear me?
Test.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, no. So we're going to hear from our panelists, both in the automation and the art world, about how we can go beyond NFTs and turn it from an end-driven solution or product to a means-driven instrument. So why don't the panelists tell us a little bit about their background?
Hi, my name is Dan Bune. My focus isn't really on NFTs. It's really around automation and workflow, robotics process automation, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. But essentially, through a lot of the processes that I worked on in my career, I got to dabble in with Chainlink and blockchain, and NFTs I see as a potential use case for every single automation that I've ever done. And I'll discuss some of the automations and how NFTs can help those automations.
Hi, my name is Steve Oliver. Owner of Stephen Oliver Studio. I'm a storyteller. And I'm an artist, and most of my work life have worked as a concept designer for companies like Walt Disney, Universal Studios, Marvel Studios, RTKL Architecture, which is now the largest architecture firm in the world. And the kind of projects I've done are, I've actually been on the opening team for several theme parks, mixed-use projects, retail chains and restaurant chains. And my studio is currently working on a graphic novel about the technological singularity. If you'd like to know more about me or see my work, you can go to stephenoliverstudio.net.
Perfect. So why don't we start with Stephen? So now that we're going beyond NFT as merely a tool for art collection or for art and collectibles, and ironically, let's target the art space. How, in your experience, right, talking about intellectual property, talking about ways to protect it, safeguard it, how do you see NFTs facilitating a vehicle to actually make that more efficient? How do you foresee NFTs not just as a means of establishing ownership or collectibles, but rather as an instrument that can help protect your IP?
So I was on a let's see, it was blockchain hyper reality, I believe, panel yesterday, and that was my question to the two gentlemen who were owners and operators and use blockchain very regularly. And basically, my question was, how do we prevent fraud? You know, I'm very concerned as an artist about how to protect my IPs, and it's a trickier thing than you might think from my standpoint. You know, from our standpoint, and the outcome of that conversation was that you know, once it becomes an NFT, it's pretty safe, and I can understand that. It's, you know, transparency and trackability. I love that possibility. The loophole that we discussed yesterday, and the thing that I think is still out there to be discussed and needs to be worked out, is what happens before it becomes an NFT. And that's problematic for a designer. I mean, when I'm working on a project, I'm pumping out hundreds of drawings, sometimes hundreds a day, and, you know, or at least dozens. And, it's not like I can stop and copyright everything I'm doing. So how do we do that? And we had a little discussion beforehand about that. Maybe we want to, I'll pitch it back to you guys. This concept of, well, how do you guys see that instant sort of copyrightability that would then protect your work and make it an NFT? Because just a worst case scenario that might happen would be somebody takes a picture of my work and registers it as an NFT of their own, and I'll never know about it unless I happen to come across it. So there's a couple different scenarios there. How would you guys solve that? I mean, is there some way to immediately register a drawing when it's done, right at your desk?
Well, that sounds like a question for our next panelist. How do we automate workflows so that we can actually achieve that in real time? And how do we turn, fifth generation blockchain into, again, an instrument that can create tools that allow for proper IP protection and fraud prevention?
Well, that's one thing that I do want to talk about is kind of the fraud around it. Essentially, what I have learned just through working through a number of financial processes, I've done mortgage processes that do lending for like high asset things like casinos. I actually worked through the Affordable Care Act processes of people enrolling for insurance. And there is a lot of fraud around. And I think that with blockchain, because since blockchain, everything is transparent, you kind of eliminate a lot of that fraud already. So basically, if you can create your assets as NFTs and basically you stamp your NFT with your ownership, and that can be tied to your own personal profile, and it can be done through biometrics because your biometrics or a barcode or something like that. Then basically, as long as you're the first person on the blockchain that delivers that asset, then it's yours. I mean, it's protected. They'll know. They can actually see it on the blockchain that you own that property.
Got it. But doesn't this also raise questions of data privacy? How do you address those?
Well, I think with the data privacy is essentially you would have to map that to something that's related to you. And then the only thing you can really that identifies you to your work is you. It's your thumbprint, it's your biometrics, it's your face, it's your eye scan. That has to be tied and that has to be digitized, and that can actually be put into the smart contract for that asset.
So back to this idea of how do I immediately register a drawing? It was just thinking that a lot of my drawings now are digital. I'm actually drawing into the screen of the computer. Is there a way to maybe create some kind of software system, or that you can, an app or something you can upload to the computer that's going to register that immediately? And can you opt into something and just say, hey, I want to register everything I do? What's the possibility of that? My understanding, by the way, is that it's pretty expensive to track blockchain. From yesterday's panel, doesn't come without a cost. So I'm sure you're going to think about that and talk about that too.
Yeah, I think that robotics process automation, workflow, and AI kind of solves that, especially with the machine learning algorithms. With machine learning, it can basically determine your art style, and basically it will learn, it will eventually learn. You can train any bot to know who the artist is.
So you just touched upon another thing I wanted to talk about, which is the appropriation of an artist's style by a artificially intelligent designer. That's obviously, for an artist who's spent a lifetime working on that style, that's a problem. And I don't know where we go with that thought. I'm not sure how you solve that, or if we do solve it, or if it's just now this is the new world we live in, but it's something I'm certainly thinking about. I'm not sure I would want an AI appropriating my style and then monetizing it and mass producing it and possibly overflooding the market with it so that nobody really wants that style anymore. I mean, I can think of all kinds of scenarios there.
Well, why don't we invert the question and talk about how the artist can actually appropriate that generative AI through the blockchain to establish ownership? Why don't we develop this idea a little further and see where it takes us?
Well, not knowing the steps, it's really just a process. Like everything's a process. It's just a number of steps that you do. And if you identify the process on how you create that asset through all the steps of creating that to a digital asset and getting that published, once you have that process, then you can automate it through robotics process automation. And basically, yeah, that's it. And what you need to do is kind of build in the human approval task also. And I mean, that's the one way you get around the AI. Always have a human approve it. It's got to be a third party, somebody. It's got to be a lawyer.
But
I
how
don't
does
know.
that scale?
That's a good question. That's something that needs to be invented.
Right. Well, I mean, this kind of takes us a little deeper into what the challenges and ultimately the opportunities behind NFT, not just as a means of establishing lifestyle brands, collectibles, and art ownership, how it actually facilitates creatives. So what we could do is maybe we can shift it a little bit into maybe an opposite situation. How do we reward creatives? How do we create a system where if you put, for instance, if Disney or an enterprise puts a creative project up to tender or rewards you for engage to earn or participation, how do we use NFTs to tokenize that and reward you for your incremental progress or contributions to an overall system? Who wants to begin there?
So yeah, I'd like to say something about that. That's that kind of, and I'm going to touch on something you just said that I liked a lot, actually. That's that, sort of, I was talking about, all right, I'm drawing into my computer all the time, so it can basically monitor everything I'm doing. And I like the idea of it learning my style, and then I can patent that style and use it. And that it was laying in bed in the middle of the night thinking about NFTs last night, and started wondering, well, I wonder if there's been a case yet where an artificially intelligent designer or artist, a cyber artist, let's say, has created a token itself. And what's to prevent it from creating a zillion tokens and that sort of thing. But I could see that as using, once the machine's learned your style and you've authorized it to use that style, and then you can begin to have it create tokens for you. That's a great scenario. I think that's a very positive way to
Yeah,
see the future
generative,
work.
real-time generative art. You can do, again, NFT arts, whatever it may be, right? With your style patented. And then if let's take it another step further and maybe talk about legal process automation. In this case, if you can tokenize the intellectual property, if you can map the IP process into steps and then tokenize it, right? Create an NFT, then I think you'd be saving ultimately on legal fees. Would you not? If done appropriately?
Yeah, actually, I have a little experience in legal workflows. What is it? There's certain processes with case management where it doesn't only apply to legal, it applies to healthcare, anything that's a case. You can actually tokenize basically every attribute of the case, where it can not be an NFT, but it can be a token. It can be some kind of token that can basically drive the legal process. Can't remember the name of the process, but there's this process that lawyers do where they basically have a whole lot of paperwork where they have to kind of do this cleanup work, and this cleanup work takes a lot of time. It's like 6 months of work. And I actually worked through this process where they basically take these files and then they basically destroy all the documents that need to be destroyed and everything. But to automate that, what you need to do is tokenize the case. And once you have an identity on the case and all the attributes of the case, whether it's a healthcare case, a legal case, then essentially you can drive a process through automation where you can automate the entire process. You can basically take all the paper processes, scan them, tag them, apply all your machine learning algorithms, and basically reassemble the case into a digital format. And anything digital can be an NFT. So that entire case and all its metadata around that case could be an NFT.
Well, yeah. So assuming that you create an NFT around these cases and assuming that you have AI that can sort through these cases efficiently, then wouldn't the process of awarding a patent be far more efficient, and couldn't platform-based solutions be derived out of that? What would be your thoughts there?
Yeah, I would actually think that can be another step in a higher level workflow. Basically, you do the legal work first, Then you basically have the idea, the concept, which is the patent. And ideas are unique. I mean, basically what a patent is, it's basically it's a original idea or it's an improvement on someone else's idea. So, but it's unique. And that's the thing what NFTs are. Every NFT is a unique thing. So that actual thing could be just a higher level automation that drives the legal workflow first and then does the patent generation stuff. And then basically what it spits out at the end is an NFT.
So it's interesting that you're going there because again, as I've been thinking about this, it seems to me that there's a lot of legal work that has to be done in this because we would have to define what art is, I think, in order to for this not to become really absurd for an artist. For instance, I was thinking last night, well, what if I took a piece of my art, turned it into an NFT, then duplicated it, changed one pixel, and created a new NFT, and the title of that NFT would basically be where the pixel is and what the color is, and then did the other 99 like that and sold them as NFTs. Those are those all original art pieces? Only one pixel's been changed. I mean, I don't know. That's a question for a lawyer, right? And I started thinking, well, why do the art? Why don't I just do a 1 pixel NFT of a color? And is that art? So there are some questions here about identity and I guess what is truth? What is real? And by the way, one thing I love about the NFT, and this is something that came up in the panel yesterday, is that I think it's a really honest attempt at creating truth. Here's something. Here's something trackable. You can see it from anybody. Can see it from anywhere. And I think it's wonderful, but it also kind of, I'm sure there are loopholes that nobody's thought about in that can be exploited, and then it doesn't become truth. So, we have probably got to be very careful. I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see. One of the reasons I haven't done an NFT to this point is because I'm just kind of waiting for the dust to settle. I think it's such an early, development that I don't know if anybody knows where it's going to go yet.
Yeah, I think where you're going is like, you want to be protected. You want to basically be protected from fraud. And that's where I've been thinking about where NFTs kind of solve that problem also. I've worked through a number of mortgage processes. I worked for a project for the Affordable Care Act where we had to do income verification. And we basically had to teach these machine learning algorithms to process these paycheck stubs, tax documents, and all this other stuff. And you can tell just by looking at it that these people are just fraudulently just putting stuff up there. So essentially, think about blockchain is it eliminates fraud because everything is transparent. If we basically had all this stuff on the blockchain, everything was reversed, because I was actually a victim of identity theft. And what's kind of funny is even though it's my identity, I can't see all the transactions the scammers are doing to me. And I think with blockchain, it's the total opposite. I mean, no one knows who you are, but they know everything about what you do. It's full transparency. And blockchain really solves the whole fraud problem. So if we kind of build these processes, these mortgage processes, these income verification processes where we create, say, an NFT of me, and then we have all this information where basically when you're born, you're gonna basically spin up a digital version of yourself that has basically your birth certificate. That's gonna be the first thing. It's gonna be your health profile because you're gonna get your vaccinations. It's eventually gonna be your education profile once you start going to school. Then it becomes your job profile when you start working. And then it becomes all your financial profile, all the other transactions you do throughout your entire lifetime. There's just different profiles about you. And if you protect all the PPI, all the private personal information through biometrics, when you see your doctor, you basically thumbprint your NFT, he sees all your medical stuff. When you apply for a job, you basically give the employer your thumbprint and he just sees your resume. Basically, you can target all this information towards the audience that you need to see it. So you're protected at all times, but basically no one can do any fraud against you because it's all transparent on the blockchain. I mean, I think with NFTs, with automation, it can actually solve fraud throughout the world.
So let's take this a step further, right? Let's keep going on this thread and let's continue with you. And then we'll go back to art and take it a step even further into the rabbit hole. But let's talk about one, because right now we glossed over a lot of very complicated use cases. Let's start with one. Let's talk about fraud in higher education. So a lot of universities, for instance, MIT, Stanford, they struggle with the fact that a lot of, people fraudulently misrepresent credentials from these institutions on LinkedIn, on their resumes. How do you use tokenization, NFTs, and the blockchain to help remediate that and prevent it?
That's going to probably be an entire evolution of the education system. Essentially, when you enroll in schools, whether it's elementary, high school, college, throughout your entire career, essentially systems will need to be generated where the educators are able to put in all the transcript information that's assigned to the person, to the student, throughout his entire career. And that's got to be approved. It's got to be there's always got to be a human in the process that says, yeah, this is true. They'll basically notarize it. So once it's notarized on the blockchain, then you can't lie on what university you went to. You can't lie about a job. You can't really lie about anything because it's all going to be transparent once you share it with that potential employer.
Well, because it's a digital immutable registry, right? So you have that. And do you want to expand on it, or?
I just wanted to expand
Yeah,
a little bit on what you said, because you touched on something we talked about yesterday. You mentioned that it sounded to me like you said the infrastructure hasn't been built yet by the healthcare system or by the system that we were just discussing. And yesterday I brought up the idea, it wasn't my idea, I read this, somebody else had the idea, I read about it. And so I brought up the idea of using blockchain to vote. Seems like that'd be a really great, there we go, you were in that meeting yesterday. And the response was by the other members of the team, well, the infrastructure hasn't been built yet by the government. So it sounds like there's a lot of infrastructure that's got to be built with this thing yet.
The government and the private sector, right? Everything from, you touched on mortgages, you touched on
Yeah,
homes.
so funny.
So in order, I have a lot of real estate tokenization projects. The issue is that many of them are probably 5 years away because of the lag in infrastructure, which is both a challenge and an opportunity. Do you want to expand on that a bit? Lending, titles, everything.
Well, let's talk about the voter thing. I actually was involved in a project with Accenture when they were actually going from state to state, writing all the election manifesto. Basically, there was a Help America Vote Act in 2003, 2004, where they had to basically electronicize all the voter registration after the 2000 election with the hanging chads. So we had to go from state to state and kind of just revamp how voter registration happens and how voting happens where it's electronic and captured. We wanted to take it one step further and allow you to vote online, but the government doesn't want that because it seems like they want to keep fraud in the system. I don't know why, but there wasn't blockchain back then, so maybe that was why. I think today would be a perfect opportunity to change that Help America Vote Act to where we put it on the blockchain, there can't be voter fraud because it's all transparent.
I wonder why. Anyhow, so look, we have let's go back into the art section, and then we can leave the final 10 minutes for questions from the audience.
Sounds good.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so well, now when you talk about physical art, right? Physical art, you see a physical manifestation of the artwork, right? You have you know that a Rembrandt is a Rembrandt, that a Monet is a Monet, you know that a building designed by Zaha Hadid is designed by Zaha Hadid, and you see it physically. Now that we're talking about a second layer where we merge the physical and the digital, right? The digital, as they say, right? And we talk about Web3. Let's talk a little bit about the metaverse and how IP and NFTs play in there, where you can't really bake in scarcity. There is no such thing as scarcity in the metaverse or in the digital sphere. So how do we use NFTs in order to bring in IP protection and start baking in scarcity into the equation?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. It's a very good question. It's something that yeah, I've thought about. I mean, what an artist will do with physical objects is create limited editions, right? If the printer or lithographer will print 100 and that's it, and then he'll breaks the mold. So I would think you'd want to translate that somehow into software. Maybe there's a software written, okay, let's go back and say you got a system that's learned, it's artificially intelligently learned your style and you've authorized it to use your style. Maybe that piece of code or whatever that system is that just learned your style can only learn your style for 100 pieces. That'd be the equivalent of breaking, breaking the mold or breaking the lithog, or wiping the lithograph plate clean.
Sure, but if we have, let's just say you have competing top-down metaverses, right? Which one, where do you position your artwork? Where do you position your IP? And what sets you apart in this case? Is it the original IP? So is it really the NFT comes before the metaverse, or does the metaverse come before the NFT? And do you pick your winners? Do you want to expand on that a little?
Not really, but I would. But you made me think of something else that we haven't really touched on much, which is increasingly, I think, art is becoming more conceptual. It's the idea more than the art. And how do you bake that into the system? I mean, it's not only learning your style, it's learning how you think. And where do we go from there? But I think it's something that's got to be, if you really want to talk about maximizing the potential for an artist, you got to talk about the concept.
So let's go back to the physical then. Let's just say you have a gallery, right? How do you use, again, this digital layer to enhance the physical one? So how do you use NFTs to, in many ways, enhance your cultural productions and add value to them and monetize them even further?
Okay, so I actually have a real case scenario with this. When I was contacted by a gallery on the West Coast several years back when Google Glass was launched. They wanted to catalog some of my work to display on Google Glass, which is, we're talking about a virtual sort of gallery in the glasses, basically. And I went ahead and did so, and then Google Glass tanked or did whatever it did, and it went absolutely nowhere. But that's a real world. I thought it was a great idea, and I went ahead and submitted work. And that, I think, is one way that I've already done that. Where we go from there, haven't given it much thought, to be honest, but I think it needs to be.
Well, I'm a musician, so I don't know about the art side, but I can kind of see with music, like if I want to publish my song and I do it as an NFT, essentially you can't have everyone have the exact same song because basically it has to be unique for it to be an NFT. So you can't just sell your song as an NFT. But I saw what Kings of Leon did. They actually published their album this past year. It's the first album that was published as an NFT, and they did it with the album cover. Basically, every album cover is a unique variation of it. So the album cover is unique to everybody, but the music's the same. That's how they did it.
Interesting. Okay. So we've talked about, well, we've covered a lot, right? We started the panel with we were talking about expanding beyond art and collectibles, and it kind of took a step or evolved into a conversation on how it can pretty much enhance, transcend, and provide instruments and tools for intellectual property, for fraud prevention, and for the enhancements of cultural productions and artwork, both in the digital and physical space. So I think now that we have about 10 minutes left, we can maybe get some questions from the audience. If anyone wants to step up to the mic and ask us questions.
Can you get
fantastic.
this, ladies? Yeah, there we go. Do I have all mine?
Superb panel, really. Thank you so much, guys. Lots of information all at one time. I'm Nadine Chino. I'm an impact inventor on a mission to make reuse a daily habit. I have a question that with respect to the blockchain, the transparency, all the wonderful things that can happen about it. So my question is fundamentally psychological. Why do humans want to hide information in the first place? And how do you think they're going to react when it becomes institutionalized as blockchain, transparency, immutable, and you can't change it. I mean, there's something but there's a reason.
But I actually have an answer. So I'm technically the moderator, but I guess I can answer
Yeah,
answer
sure.
it directly. Yeah, look, I think in this case, it really all comes down, in my opinion, to traceability. So with traceability in the blockchain, you have an immutable ledger where now it's no longer greenwashing in the case of sustainable development. Right now, you actually have to have inputs that get verified, and then you can actually see your carbon footprint and where it's being applied. And that can also become hyper local in the event that, for instance, New York State institutes laws where if you are, an offender, you can't just buy carbon credits in the abstract to offset. It has to be done in state, right? So maybe you use that, right, to offset, use the blockchain to buy carbon credits and offset directly in technology that affects the New York State area, right? So that's one example of how this could work. And we actually do a lot of work in sustainable development and the carbon markets and traceability on the blockchain.
Okay, that's an offline conversation. So just to make it quick, because I'm sure there are other people behind me here. You talked about multiple metaverses. Please educate me. This is the first time I'm hearing about multiple metaverses. So help me understand.
Shall I take this one too, or do you guys want to go? Or yeah.
Yeah, basically anyone who produces a metaverse, someone could basically fork it. I mean, basically Sandbox was probably the first big one, but then there's Axie Infinity, they're doing one. And almost everyone who's Web 3.0 is creating their own metaverse. Eventually, what they need to do is integrate them all somehow. That's the next step. Is let everyone create their own metaverses, but then the next step after that, you need to integrate that with a higher layer. I don't know what you're going to call that. What do you call the higher layer above the metaverse? I don't know, but that the oververse. I don't know. I don't know what they're going to call it, but yeah, there's got to be some integration. So you can't have the same thing across all of these different platforms.
Gotcha. Thank
Yeah,
you.
and to add to that, and I'm probably answering my own question when having this discussion, I think that's where NFTs play a crucial role. I think you have a lot of competing metaverses, quote unquote, right? You have Algorand, you have Sandbox, you have a lot of these, but ultimately it all comes down to the IP and where the IP is positioned. And that's where, you'll see what ultimately takes off and how it's reinvented.
Thank you so much. I have to have offline conversations with all of you.
Step on the X. Hi, Mary Patry, IT Effectivity. First, thank you, because I have to tell you, blockchain has not been something I've taken a lot of energy to understand. And this simple conversation with you all here has really brought me light years ahead of where I was. But my question is very simple. As you know, obviously, blockchain NFTs has really had an impact on the artist's world. But as a consumer of art, as a lover of art, I don't get it. I don't get how my owning an NFT or my having, a possession of an NFT allows me to enjoy it or allows me to share it. Is there a simple answer to that question?
Well, some people apparently really enjoy, are you talking about the NFT itself or the cyber artist created art? Or both?
It's really the cyber artist created art.
Okay, so let me just give you an example of people who did like it. And maybe you've heard this. This is a news story I read not too long ago. There's a gentleman who used a cyber artist. I guess you can tweak the parameters. I haven't done it myself, so I don't know. But I guess you can tweak the parameters and you have some control over it as a human. But the artist or the digital artificial intelligence designers designing the thing. He created a piece. He submitted it to a gallery or to an art show, pretty big one, and the thing won. He didn't tell anybody who did it, but the piece won. I took a look at it myself. I haven't been impressed with digital art created artificially myself either, but I took a look at it and said, this thing's pretty amazing. This looks like a cross between Sid Mead and Rembrandt or Turner or something. I mean, it was beautifully done, and it was a really compelling piece of content. And I think you may not be impressed now, but you may be in the future Now, what's not impressive to me is the fact that that's not a human doing it. There's something, I think that art, and this is a subjective thing, okay? Everybody's got their own ideas about it. But I think if you divorce art from the human being, there's some key thing lacking in my mind or heart or something somewhere.
Right.
So I commiserate with you on that. But as far as the art goes itself, I think it's developing really fast and it probably will get better and better.
But it's just for clarity, it isn't the art or the visualization of that rendition or interpretation of the artist's work. It's more of that human side, for example, going to a gallery, sitting on that bench, contemplating what the artist meant by what they're portraying, that I don't know how I enjoy in the digital world.
Okay, so I think the issue, and I'm speaking from the perspective of a collector of both physical and digital art who
Okay.
works on the blockchain, right? So I think that number one, it's awkward because how does it fit into your home as a decorative item, right? So it
Does
could
it?
work maybe, well, you have VR and AR tools, you have
Yeah.
screens,
Okay.
and that's one layer to it, but it's all really subjective. It all
Okay.
really depends on what you prefer. I personally prefer physical art, right?
Okay.
However, I have collaborated with artists where you use AI or holograms, for instance, to tell a story that enhances the art
Okay.
and to monetize and productize an existing piece, right? So you kind of mass produce it and offer it to an audience that cannot traditionally afford a Jeffrey Koons or a work of that sort, no? Then on another note with, and I think it's what you were alluding to, generative AI, I think, it's just in Basel and it's reached a level where it's all very recent, where it's frighteningly skillfully crafted.
Thank you so much. I know it's probably a little more complex of a question than I meant.
Well, not really, but I love what your train of thought there, because again, this harkens back to something we talked about yesterday's panel, which is
Like, I think the thing about when you're talking about NFTs, it's digital, and we're talking about physical art, it's physical. So you want to basically hang up your physical art in your physical house. What you would do with your NFT is you can hang that painting up in your digital house on like a metaverse. You can buy land, build it your house, and you can build your exact house you have in the real world, make it digital, painting there. So when you're in your AR augmented world or your virtual reality world in the metaverse, you have that painting in your digital house.
I fully acknowledge my grandchildren may appreciate that more than I do.
so one of the things you said, though, that I thought was really key was you were in a human being's painting. You're seeing the history of the human being in that painting. That's what you just said.
Seeing,
And I think that's true. So there are a lot of identity issues, I think, with the way things are going. And again, back to what is true and what's not true, what's real and what's not real. These are all questions that are very deep and fundamental to human beings that need to be answered. Unless we want to live in a very cold world. And I'll give you an example. When modernism first exploded in the 50s, they built a whole city in Brazil, I think it was called Brasilia. Yeah, Brazil. It was a totally modernist city using concrete, glass, and steel. Minimalism, form follows function, all those things, right? Well, what happened with the people? People moved out. They hated it. There was no cultural context within those buildings in that environment for them to hang on to. There was no soul, basically. You stripped away the soul, and people moved out of Brasilia en masse. It was the capital of Brazil. It still is, I think. So if we want this to be successful and to be a part of the human experience, I think these things have to be discussed and talked about. I'm grateful that you brought that up.
Thank you.
Very quick. But I also think that the question is a little bit the way like real diamonds is to synthetic diamonds. And there is an audience and an appreciation for synthetic diamonds. And so I think there may be something about computer generated art that's purely computer generated that we can also start to learn to appreciate. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you and agreed.
I have a simple question. I heard you said identity issue, right, at NFT. Then you said the data set issue, different type of data set, the personal data, medical data, school data, job data. Question to you. Who decide the data set rule? Who enforce that rule?
It's you approve that. Like you go see your doctor, he's your doctor, he needs to see your medical records. He can only access that information on the NFT through your biometrics. So you apply that to him, it has the automation behind that process, knows that he's your doctor. So you're only sharing medical information with your doctor. You're only sharing educational information with your employer, your work experience with your employer. It knows who you're sharing the information with as it's extracting that information from the blockchain. So they will then be able to map that to you, and then you become what's called doxed, I guess. You're doxed to your doctor, you're going to be doxed to your employer.
But you can decide that information, who to share. It's based upon the platform you use, right?
Exactly. It's still your information. The doctor, once he sees the information, and then you take that NFT away after he treats you, they don't know it anymore unless they memorized it. I don't know, like if they have an eidetic memory, then they'll know all the billions of transactions that happened with you. But
I understand the data belongs to you. You decide who you want to share, but what if the platform does not enforce the rule, does not provide the capability, has some security leak or drawback?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I couldn't quite understand.
So, I mean, the platform could have bugs, could have the policy or rule default or drawback.
I agree, but I think those are edge cases. I think that the promise of what this solution could bring to the fore outweighs the potential bugs that could happen in the system, right? And it's and these seem like edge cases, and I think we're out of time, unfortunately. So
What's a percentage that percentage or rate of the bugs or drawbacks? Because you know the data security enforce requires 100% secure. And what's the percentage of this bug?
well, technically the blockchain is impenetrable, and this would all have to be HIPAA compliant, I presume, but I don't know the exact figures.
Thought. So yeah, that's definitely something we need to think through, because this is just concepts right now. It doesn't exist, but these are just ways you can take this technology.
And hello. Yep. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for a thought-provoking panel, and thank you for all the interesting questions. And yeah, looking forward to meet all of you.